I went to Grace Cathedral in March on a trip with a friend that had just lost her daughter named Grace,
Mm.
22-year-old named Grace.
Oh,
And when I went up to San Francisco, I said I had one thing I wanted to do. My daughter was still in school. I would be staying in her dorm. And I said, I just want to go walk a labyrinth. I've walked the labyrinth since 2010, Lauren, that you trained Kathleen Noon back then, and she brought it to the North Hollywood Church of Religious Science. And she said to say hello to you. And Cynthia James was the one that had a correlation. So I want to be able to utilize your information more than what I know. And perhaps you would want to come back for a second morning on the labyrinth, because there's so much that this story is so profound to me. And if I stop myself, I kind of would get too moved that I wouldn't be able, I would become overcome with emotion. But I don't want to do that, because you're all here to learn a little bit and experience a little bit about the labyrinth. So would you like to just tell us a little bit about your journey with the labyrinth and how you actually came about Grace Cathedral and your journey there?
So you're asking me, Amy?
Yes.
Actually, I'd be just delighted and honored actually to do a further presentation on the labyrinth. So I'll be very, very brief. But this group loves synchronicity, and synchronicity has woven in and out of my life. And I would say by synchronicity. Alan Jones invited me to be canon pastor. I was teaching with him in New York City. And there's all synchronicity about meeting Alan Jones, and unfortunately, recently, the late Alan Jones. And he invited me to be canon pastor. So here I am. I'm plopped into a plump job in the Episcopal Church. I was ordained, but I never even put an application in.
Oh, wow.
So let me just stop there and invite you to come forward with your presentation. I'm very eager to hear about your journey with the labyrinth.
Thank you so much, Lauren, and welcome. Thank you very much, and Dana for being and bringing this too. All right, so Tim.
yeah. All right. I'll put this up. We'll just give me a thumbs up if you can see it well. And let me see. We're going to bring this up. We're going to share screen. Here we go.
So this is Grace Cathedral, and when I went to San Francisco, like I said, I was staying with my daughter, and she was very concerned about me traveling the city of San Francisco by myself. And she said, make sure you don't talk to anyone on the bus, don't look at anybody, don't be your friendly self. It's not the same world that you know, Mom. Well, I took a bus there. It was absolutely fine. So we can start with the first slide. And so there I am in her dorm with her crossbody and just ready to go face this new labyrinth that I Googled. I said, I just want to walk a labyrinth. And the first place that showed up was Grace Cathedral. So I looked at the bus route, and I got on 2 separate buses and headed to up to Grace Cathedral. I knew synchronicity was afoot when I saw the word Grace Cathedral after the mom had just left, dropped me off in San Francisco, and her daughter Grace, like I said, had passed away on November 12th. Next slide. I am walking up the hill of Nob Hill, and I see Delphi Apartments. This is very important because back in August, I chose to go back to college. I said I need to get my own degree, and this semester I'm taking a Western civilization class, and I wouldn't have known what Delphi was unless I had taken the Western civilization class, and my professor explained the Delphi phenomenon and also the labyrinth and the Minotaur, and talking all about the labyrinth. And of course, I raised my hand in class saying, I've walked a labyrinth, and maybe they were really quite enlightened beings back then that they had this labyrinth. So next slide. Walking up the hill on Nob Hill, very windy. That is the spiral of the Grace Cathedral that I just thought, here I go. I didn't look at any pictures before I went. I just was walking, trudging up. So next slide. Again, there's the stairs up. Next slide. I wasn't really prepared when I went in. I love Gothic architecture so much. It just speaks to my whole soul. So I'm just mesmerized by the blue skies and this building just greeting me and almost, welcoming me. Next slide. And my breath was taken away when I took that corner. You go in and there's a little desk off there to the left, and I I literally my breath was just, I wanted to fall to my knees. It was so gorgeous. Next slide. They have a whole, I think, docent tour on their stained glass windows, and you can't even possibly see them all because you would have to have a scaffolding to get yourself up high enough to see the very tip top layer. And while I was there, there were people on a tour, and they'd brought their binoculars so they could actually zoom in and check these amazing works of art out. Next slide. And then they have all history of San Francisco and portraits all down. The artwork was better than any museum I've been in the past 20 years. Next slide. So here, and it's just, they're just wrapping up Chinese New Year. This is a statue by an artist out of France. This is, I do believe, uh, Father Francis. Anyway, he was. I felt in my own personal journey, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm still here on Chinese New Year, which is such a huge moment for me because I believe I had a past life in China. So next slide. So here I am about ready to walk on the labyrinth, centering myself, just wanting to go in. If you haven't walked a labyrinth, you just set an intention, and I personally clear my space to what universe and what the labyrinth has to teach me. And I was amazed that there wasn't anyone else in the building. I felt like I had this place to myself. So I start walking the labyrinth, and I did zero research. So next slide. Again, the beauty and the architecture encompass and just make you feel so filled with this grandeur that you're witnessing this. Next slide. So I'm on the labyrinth, and as I'm on the labyrinth, my first mystical experience happens. And if you'll play that, Tim, I had no idea that what was going to happen at this moment. The bells sounded like Gregorian chants. At the very end, like bell 10 and 11 and 12, there was this harmony of Gregorian effect that was coming through. And
Mhm.
So I don't know if is that something that the bells do, Lauren?
Yes, I'm not sure that there's 40 bells, but it would reflect, yes, the a pentatonic, which would be the pentatonic scale, all the black keys on a piano. So they all would match, and it would indeed echo a Gregorian pattern. Sure. Mhm.
Ah, well, see, that is just delightful to know because I thought that it was just this, again, it was very magical and mystical, and I'm glad I caught that.
Mhm.
So I then just wandered about the 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 cathedral for the next 4 hours. Next slide, Tim. And the pattern falling on the labyrinth, and your labyrinth is just exquisite. And maybe you want to tell us a little bit how you got the labyrinth to Grace Cathedral at this moment, Lauren, if you want.
Well, that's quite a journey. There's quite a story there. But we started in Canvas in 1991, and because we could only present it at 2 times a month, we moved to a tapestry labyrinth. And when I present, I'll be happy to show these slides if you're interested. And then, which was the tapestry was a 100% wool rug
Wow.
that was there for 13 years. And then we moved to this is a limestone marble labyrinth that we put in 2007. There's one outdoors too, Amy. I don't know if you discovered that or not. But so this was put in just before Alan Jones retired in 2008. So let me just stop right there.
Okay,
So.
thank you. Very good. Okay, next slide, Tim. Thank you, Lauren. And again, this I think this is Nike, the goddess Nike, and I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't have gone back to college. So I felt like this, I felt really assured that my path learning was leading me to these new understandings of what I have only just begun to crack open that awaits me. Next slide. And this was so moving to see the city of San Francisco when it caught on fire, and the firemen, and there's a plaque that's there saying, that they went in and they captured and got all of the things out that they could of the old cathedral as it burnt. And maybe Lauren, a little bit more than that.
This is from the earthquake in 2006, and showing it would be the old Bush church there. The cathedral wasn't actually a cathedral at that time. Interestingly, that each of the faces and portraits are from the present day people who were on the staff of the cathedral. So that's one thing the artist included. And you can see on the left the young girl holding her cat, and it demonstrates that they ran out of water. The earthquake stopped the underground channels of water, so the hydrants and all of that were useless, and that's what they're demonstrating.
Mm. How interesting that they use modern day people. That's terrific. I don't think the sign said that on there, so that was good. All right, next slide, Tim. The same. This is a little bit further. Oh no, this is the different side. And I'm just going to keep going through because there's so much history that we could just keep going. We'll just keep going a little bit. Next slide, Tim. That's a little bit more up close. The artwork. When do you know, Lauren, when these were painted and
Um,
installed?
let's see. The cathedral was dedicated in 1964, so it would have been the creation of that beforehand. So these are fairly modern paintings. I would say probably during the late 50s, early 60s. I'm guessing a bit, but it's around that time.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Next slide, Tim. Just the windows again are just exquisite. There's from what I understand, that there's the building, there's older windows and newer windows from where they extended the church out. And these are the newer windows. And then next slide. This was really an interesting thing they have there as well. It's an AI. You move through the painting, and it tells you how the painter actually did. Michelangelo did this, so that was interesting. Next slide. Keith Haring. So this is in the Grace Cathedral's AIDS dedicated chapel. They had a piece of the quilt that was over 500,000 pounds, or it's enormous what's in the Smithsonian. And Grace Cathedral has dedicated one chapel to AIDS since it was such a hard hit. San Francisco was so hard hit with the AIDS epidemic. Keith Haring, the artist, you're able to kneel down in front of this sculpture, and this was Keith Haring's last work of art. He did this, and then when he stepped back away from it, he said, "Oh wow, that's so heavy." And you're literally, it's not protected by anything. You could, it's just right in front of you as you're kneeling down, saying your thoughts, your prayers, and there's a candle, uh, little altar that you can light a candle to all the people that had passed, which I did, to several friends that I knew had lost people, and then also to my own aunt who was a Peace Corps volunteer in Malawi. She got into a accident and had a blood transfusion, and she contracted AIDS from a blood transfusion. She didn't die till many years later, but on her death, we found out that that is what she had had all those years. So I had lit a candle to that. And this Keith Haring piece is just so profound, with all the people reaching up, and you can see for yourself, and the angels. Next slide. This is looking down the hallway towards a sculpture and a stained glass window. Next slide. I do believe this is one of the older windows in the 1964 cathedral, not the addition of the newer windows. Okay, next slide. And this is a mural dedicated to it gives you a symbol of the gold rush, and where the old cathedral in the center there is. And on the left side, you'll see tents on the mountainside, and those were immigrants that had pitched tents and brought food. You'll see Chinese immigrant workers there. You'll see the gold rush people panning gold. You'll see if you could zoom in, I don't think we can, but the gentleman on the right has an ace sticking up out of his pocket. And the ace is symbolizing a gamble that people are taking to come out to the West and to really see if they're going to hit gold. And anything you want to add about this, Lauren, please add.
No, you're observing things I haven't seen, so this is fun.
All right, next slide. And this is one of their original organs that they roll out for special events, and they still use it today, but it's very old as far as I know. Okay, next slide. This window, they're just, if you look way above it, next slide too, just gonna go briefly. That's the universe. So they have a beautiful stained glass of the creation of the universe. Next slide. To see how we are on time. This is a mural on the rear wall from, I think, obviously you can come back and see this in next slide. So the great thing about the Grace Cathedral is that I felt like I was kind of pretty much there all by myself, it seemed, and you could just get in so many nooks and crannies. They don't hold it back from you. It's so lovely that they let you wander these this exquisite architecture and sit and feel the history of what's happening. Those tapestries are from the 13th, I think from the 13th century. Is that correct, Lauren? Right, next slide.
Wow.
This one is cherubs working in the it just was so beautiful. Are they working in the Garden of Eden, or yes, so tapestry. You can go right up, look right at, I guess you could touch it if you wanted to. I didn't. FYI, I did not. Next slide. And the other one on the opposite room. Next slide. This is a painting of Mary and Jesus as a child. I don't know much about this painting, Lauren. Do you?
Actually, no, I don't. I think that's a fairly new installation.
Okay,
No,
very
I
good.
haven't seen that. Mhm.
It's gorgeous. It's exquisite. Next slide. They have flags of all the different countries because this is also the birthplace of the United Nations. So the United Nations was formed at Grace Cathedral back in 64.
I think earlier than that, 48,
Oh,
48,
48.
and the, yeah. And the
But
older cathedral the older part of the cathedral would have been in existence then. Mhm.
okay, very good. So 1948, the United Nations formed here at Grace Cathedral. Next slide. And next slide. Just going to give you a brief overview. The architecture, they built this in 4 years.
Mm.
From when they started in 1960, when they finally got the okay to go ahead, and they found their architect that wanted to finish it. It seems like from what I was reading up on it was completed in 4 years. Is that correct to your understanding,
Well,
Lauren?
the earlier part, the Chapel of Grace, and the earlier part that you mentioned about the older windows, that was the construction on the cathedral was stopped during the Depression. So the earlier part was there since 1928, and then later, when they found the funds under James Pike and all, it was completed within those 4 years. The second half of it. Mm.
Amazing. Next slide. Again, the universe. Next slide. I do believe this is the 12 apostles and the Last Supper, perhaps. Next slide. We're going to go through again. I'm just showing what I just think it's so interesting that I was so captivated that I took so many photos that afternoon, not knowing why until, they said, well, come do a morning. And I would have had no idea that it would be with a scholar that has been involved with the cathedral, such as Lauren. Next slide, Tim. This took my breath away. It's a wood carving that is of the Madonna and Jesus. And just regardless of faith, the absolute exquisite detail of this work of art was mesmerizing. Next slide. So as we know in our group, Mary Grace, I lit this candle for Mary Grace that day, so that for everything that she does and gives our group, I really felt that she's our light that keeps us going so often. So next slide. This was it was erected in 1860. That was very cool that they kept that. And I can't quite read it, but 1860. Next slide. And this is the ode to the United Nations, and it's done in beautiful mahogany, I think, and then beautiful, thinly tapped out tin. And it's the next slide, I think it will show you, but it has so many details of how the United Nations came together, and it's dedicated there on the bottom to all of the religions of the world. So they really had peace in mind when, they were building the United Nations. And what a great place to have it start and be honored at Grace Cathedral. Next slide. Another view. You can see off to the right the place you can kneel down and light a candle there as well. Next slide. A little closer up of the apostles. Next slide. Chair from probably, it's Tim and I were looking at this yesterday, just all the things say patience, peace, kindness. And Tim was very astute to point out those are also Buddhist, the noble truths of Buddhism. Next slide. Moving up again, you're free to just peruse this cathedral, which is like most places would have this off limits to a regular person. And maybe I wasn't supposed to, but I just felt like there were no ropes. I didn't go past roped place. You were able to be up at the very front of the church. Next slide. And Lauren, I'm going to stop there for you because I know you have to leave at 8:30 and it's 8:29. And I would love it if you would I would come back.
I would love to. That would, and I'd be very focused around the labyrinth and all that story unfolding. And I'd be delighted to, Amy.
Yeah, because Lauren, you have to go right at 8:30. Is that correct? Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I will look forward to thank you so much for being here and sharing your expertise with us.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the privilege of being here. Thank you so much. And have a blessed day, everyone. Thank you for having me today.
And please come back, Lauren, if you're around. We do this every Tuesday morning at 7 to 9.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. And I'll stay in touch with Dana. He and I have another meeting later today. So
Okay.
thank you so much. Bye, Amal. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, so I think I'll probably stop the presentation, maybe just a few more, and then we'll carry on when she comes back next time. So if you have any questions, maybe we can discuss from here about your thoughts on what we've learned so far. Yes, Bill.
Yes, thank you, Amy. This has been amazing and beautiful. First of all, I love the way that your transcendental moment, uh, I guess, portrayed that through the photos and the bell, and we got that sense it really clearly. I certainly did. I also wanted to I felt I didn't have enough time to look at. There was one, I think it was Michelangelo that you referenced, where there were numbers or dimensions that were written out, and I would have loved to hear more about that.
So yeah, I have a video of that. It's one of those as you walk along the piece, it shows you exactly the dimensions that Michelangelo would have to do in order to get that feeling of of how he made God so big and man so enormous too. And I can send you that video. I did not put it in the slide, but I'd be happy to send it to anyone that would like it.
Great, thank you.
Kristen.
Good morning. I live in San Francisco, and I was so happy to hear about this Grace Cathedral presentation. I usually go there the third Monday of the month, and they have a sound healing there, which is absolutely amazing. People bring their yoga mats and their blankets, and Fractals of Sound is the the band. They always have a guest musician, and I've learned about so many instruments I've never heard of before because they're always bringing new exotic instruments in. And so I wanted to share that. And then the question I had was, I've actually never really walked the labyrinth. I've been there so many times. And what was your experience in connecting with the labyrinth itself that really sparked the light in you? Or could you share a little bit
Sure.
about the meditation of that?
Thank you so much, Christian. So the second half of this presentation, I ended up going to it, the sound bath that they usually have on Mondays, but they had one on Saturday night, and that's in the second half. And that's where I had even more of a, I mean, talk about a magical, mystical experience. That's when I had the the second one that really forever has shifted my consciousness. So a labyrinth, when I first started walking the labyrinth here in LA, we had a canvas one too that Kathleen Noon had brought in, and it was a huge canvas, life size of the labyrinth. And you walk the labyrinth, it's like and you walk it with other people, or sometimes you walk it alone, but the labyrinth is a way that we walk through life. And it is a pause before you enter into the labyrinth. You pause, you clear yourself for things that this very old, again, it goes back to the Minoans in the Minotaurs, that they had labyrinths back then. I'm sure that Dana has done a presentation on the labyrinth, and I was blown away when I tapped into Dana's labyrinth thing, and there's Laura Artest from Grace Cathedral. It's so synchronistic, and the fact that you've been there and you live in San Francisco is delightful. So I suggest there's just Google and go walk a labyrinth. You've got two right there in San Francisco, and go with just no expectation and just really lean into your soul and yourself. And the other thing is walking a labyrinth, and if there's other people around, it's how we pass people in our lives. So you acknowledge them, but you sometimes don't have to give them everything, but you acknowledge their existence, because we're all walking a pathway back home, and we're on the path of love. So that's one thing that I've really found profound from walking labyrinths. And well, I'll save that for the next time. Go ahead. Anyone else? Thank you, Kristen, for the question. Dana, did you want to add anything there about
Yeah,
your
I was going to put the link to the World Labyrinth Day Myth Salon in there.
perfect? And that someone just also texted that that's May 4th coming up. So for those of us that are in LA, if we'd like to go walk a labyrinth, last night I was at an art event, and this woman that I'd never met, well, I met her once. When I walked in, she looked at this painting I did last night, and she said, "That reminds me of a labyrinth." And I said, "That's funny you say that. I'm doing a presentation on the labyrinth tomorrow." And she said, "There's a place in West Adams that has a labyrinth that I walked 30 years ago." And so we Googled it, and it's still free and available. And have you walked that one, Dana?
No, I haven't, but I'm aware of it. I saw it when I was in graduate school down there, and it was just something. I will say the focus on the labyrinth for me is more contemporary now that I've been doing my own spiritual explorations. Before it just seemed to be, like one of those designs you would see, and I never really reacted to it. So that just kind of like shows my own lack of enlightenment in my earlier years.
Well, earlier this year, I got this one. I'll show you. So it's a wood labyrinth, and it's one that you can trace with your finger, because even just printing out a labyrinth and tracing your finger all the way to the center is a form of meditation that you can get a lot of insight and grounding from doing this pattern. And then Saturday and Sunday, I was working alongside Samuel. And Samuel and his pendants, as you know, he's got these amazing pendants. He has labyrinth pendants that are just exquisite. And you know, we are so blessed to have so many creative people that are so in line with the labyrinth. It's full of synchronistic meanings. Yes, Samuel. Oh, well, let's see. Afton had her hand. Go ahead, Afton.
Well, I'm just blown away by this cathedral. I had no idea that in America there was anything like this. And Patricia and I are in a Sunday art appreciation and history class every Sunday. And I can't believe the diversity and the history, the hundreds of years that this represents. It's just so incredibly moving. And I would propose some of us might make a trip up there together on the day of the sound bath. And wow, it's each
Yeah.
piece is so unique, is so beautiful. And if this was in a museum, you would have someone in the room telling you don't touch, watching every move you did. The trust and the openness to have that available to just be with yourself without a guard, watching over you and tapping you, don't get so close. It just blows my mind. So
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to get a book on it today. It just blows my mind.
So in the second half, because this is not all of it, but the thing that when I left, you know, I had no idea. I'm like, I turned a corner and I saw something, and then this was the last place Martin Luther King spoke.
Wow.
And when you get to that level of history and are able to see that the whole building just invokes such a peace and such a state of how can we do better? We have to be in alignment, and so the second half has got more stuff too. So thank you, Afton, and I agree with you. We should do a trip. And Lisa.
So we are very blessed in Los Angeles to have a plethora of labyrinths. There's one in Forest Lawn in Glendale, the top of the hill, that I've walked, and it's beautiful. And there's also, believe it or not, a labyrinth in Walt Disney Hall that you can just access from the outside. It's upstairs, but it's a smaller labyrinth. So we have a lot of little jewels all over the city.
Yeah. Thank you. Ruth.
And then Nita too after Ruth.
Okay, great. Oh, and Samuel too.
Samuel.
Great. Got
Samuel
it.
too. Yeah.
Right, so first of all, very inspiring, especially your photographs are filled with awe. And I wanted to just comment that there's a place in northern Italy near Torino that's called Damanhur. I don't know how many people have visited it. I call it the eighth wonder of the world, where a group of people carved into the mountainside a temple of humanity. And they're a community of about 1,000 families, and they live according to a different philosophy and cosmology. And in their garden, they have several labyrinths that they created. One of them is called the Labyrinth to Have a Dream. In other words, it's not just experiencing the labyrinth of where you are at the moment, but it's actually a kind of medicinal walk that helps you have a dream that you need for your life. And there are 3 labyrinths. They pay a lot of attention to it during the year of keeping them, in good shape and so forth. So it's a culture that uses the labyrinth as a form of prayer and a form of creation. Let's put it that way. So I don't know who else has been there from our group, but it's really an extraordinary place. I recommend that you don't leave this earthly plane until you visit there.
Great. Thank you so much, Ruth. Samuel.
Thank you. I've been working with the sacred symbols for over 15 years, and they each have a meaning and they're very powerful. They work
subliminally on the subconscious mind. And as far as the labyrinth goes, it sort of simulates the shape of the brain. The brain curves in on itself. And in walking the labyrinth, you're unwinding the brain, allowing it to breathe. And when you get to the center, you stop and you meditate, and you become more centered.
Balanced right and left hemisphere.
Balances
Yeah,
the
that's
right
right.
and left hemisphere of the brain. So these symbols are tremendously powerful. They're called yantras, and they're symbols that take us to a deeper place in our psyche. And I highly encourage you to find a symbol that resonates with you and wear it or put it up on the wall to remind you that we're bodies living as spiritual beings in a physical body. We can get that backwards a lot of times.
True.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Michelle.
We also have Nita too. She's been
Oh, okay,
waiting
Nita.
for
So Nita, and then Michelle, then Lovita.
Nita, unmute.
I had the great pleasure to walk the Chartres Labyrinth many years ago. I had a half a day there. And again, it began an obsession of collecting labyrinths, and I wanted to show you this.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the canvas ones that they make room size. And that's beautiful, Nita.
It's available from Celestial Designs in Canada.
Great.
In case you're interested.
Great. Michelle. Thank you, Nita.
Amazing, because since you've been talking, Amy, I was doing a little Googling, and it come to find out that the largest labyrinth in the world is in La Hacienda here in Costa Rica. So it's in near Tamarindo, surrounded by 74 acres. So I think maybe you all just should consider coming here and we'll go together. But I have walked the labyrinth, not at Grace Cathedral. I used to do teaching and performing at the Cathedral School for Boys next door. I didn't know it was there. But I've done that in Glastonbury, England, and then in Unity Church in Bellevue, Washington has a labyrinth. So this has been really rich. But now I have to investigate this one, La Hacienda in Costa Rica.
And send us photos and tell us more.
Yes, you have to make a trip. This looks really fascinating to me, and I'm so thrilled we have something right here that I can go and experience, particularly after what you've been sharing this morning. It's made it very special, Amy. Thank you.
And Lovita.
Thank you, Amy. This has been just beautiful. I inadvertently accidentally discovered a labyrinth while on a trip with two of our members up in Northern California, up by Mount Shasta. And it's just in a plateau area in the dirt with rocks collected from the area. And it was wonderful to be able to have the opportunity to experience that on that close to the mountaintop. You don't get to the mountaintop, but up at Mount Shasta, that's one. And I find it incredible. Was there a charge for this, Amy? Do they?
So that's a great question. If you go into the church, because it is a church, and you're just wanting to go light a candle, then no, they don't charge you. But there was a $12 fee, but if you couldn't pay it, they weren't going to restrict you. But I thought $12 was, just so reasonable, and actually not enough when you come away with all of the amount of history that you get to see. There's still so much more that I didn't tap. That the second one, it's mind-blowing. And I love the person who said that it's not guarded. And Paul, you have one, or Bonnie, I'm not sure which. Paul or Bonnie?
Yes, it's me. If you look at the pictures from the James Webb telescope, you can see all these galaxies, and they are all circular with something at the center. Even our solar system is circular with the sun at the center. Very much resembles that labyrinth. And somehow they knew that. So,
Wow. Wow. Well, anyone else? That this is just Tim, thank you so much for putting all of he really was diligent with my inability. And Eugenia, you have a question.
Thank you. God, this is fascinating, Amy. What a great presentation. Um, I look when I'm traveling and see where labyrinths are. And when I was in San Francisco in November, there was one walking distance from where I was, and it was at a hospital. I think maybe it was on Sutter Street. But it was part of the hospital on the grounds. They had just put it in there. And I just thought, how perfect is that, where people are so stressed and so traumatized that you can just go out and unwind your brain. I didn't know that part either. So it's fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is I think divine intelligence for myself that day when I Googled which labyrinth I should go walk. The first one pulled up was Grace Cathedral. And then my other friends Googled to go walk a labyrinth, and that was not the first one that showed up. So because there's so many in San Francisco, I think I was definitely led to Grace Cathedral for many reasons. And today, 2 months later, this is or a month later. So thank you. And again, Tim, thank you for your help, and Dana for your bringing lore, and I do believe that she'll come back, and I have more inquiries for her.
Yeah, when Amy and I were talking, there was so much here that it cannot fit just into one meeting. So there'll be a part 2 coming up, and then Amy's even greater insight and spiritual experience. So you can stay tuned for that.
Oh, Amy, thank you so much.